I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside. It's so comfortable, and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off-road. The guy managed the group. He was like, what are you doing in this beautiful car? I'm like, I'm going off-road. He's like, are you sure? Because you can use one of ours. And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, no, we're going to do this. And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability, as well as its robust interior, are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
Sometimes it takes a different approach to help you unlock your true potential. Capella University's game-changing FlexPath format helps you learn at your own pace and fit earning a degree into your life. From before you enroll to after you graduate, you'll be supported by people who are invested in your success so you can pursue your goals knowing that help is available if you need it. Imagine your future differently at capella.edu.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show on the Choose Yourself Network. Today on the James Altucher Show.
When you were sitting in that room with all the writers for The Simpsons, did you say like, oh my gosh, this is the dream come true?
No. I got hired at The Simpsons because nobody else wanted the job. And it was, a beloved cult classic. It was also the lowest rated show on TV. And Sam Simon called me. I said, you want to work on The Simpsons? I go, why are you calling me? I don't know you. And he says, everyone else has turned me down. It seemed not only like a surefire loser of a show, but actual career poison. So I took the Simpsons job. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. And it was like any summer job. It's like, well, I won't be doing this forever, so let's just have some fun. And maybe that's the secret of the show. We said, no one's going to watch it. Let's just make this for us.
Well, like you say, I think that's part of its charm. Because you guys wrote those shows just to make yourselves laugh. It's this whole idea of the process was more important than the outcome.
Yes.
I am so happy Mike Reiss is here. Mike Reiss, if you don't know his name, you certainly know his work very well. He's been involved with The Simpsons for most of its 30 years. Are they on their 30th season now?
Our 30th year begins in September.
Yeah, because Nancy Cartwright, who does the voice of Bart, was here right when the 29th season was starting. You were the showrunner in 2 of the first 4 years, is that right?
Yeah, seasons 3 and 4.
Yeah, and then you wrote tons of episodes. You've produced hundreds of episodes. You're a consulting producer now for them, and work on stuff with them. You've also worked on a ton of movies. You've written 17 children's books. You've written a play that broke box office records
in Connecticut.
But still a lot of.
It's a place.
I've gone to Connecticut to see a play even. You also wrote, amazingly, for The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson.
Yes, I'm that old. He was very old and I was very young, and we crossed paths for a couple of years.
Yeah, I feel like not many people still working could say, oh yeah, I wrote for Johnny Carson.
It was something, yeah. It's still, if it wasn't for The Simpsons, I think I could dine out on Johnny Carson for a while still.
And you probably would have ended up, well, I mean, we'll talk about The Simpsons, we'll talk about your book, I just want to mention too, you were on It's Garry Shandling Show, which must have been an amazing education in comedy.
Yes, it was.
And you also wrote for one of my favorites back in the day, not necessarily the news.
Oh, good. It's getting a little attention now.
Because it was like the first Daily Show.
Yes. I wrote about it for the book, and they just said, no one knows what you're talking about. It got cut out, but it's an amazing incubator, that show, where I think 17 Simpsons writers got their start on that show. They had a really good eye for talent and taking a risk on writers right out of college.
Well, it reminds me always there are certain hot spots in every industry where that hot spot becomes sort of the incubator of talent. So like, let's say in Silicon Valley, I'll take a completely different industry. PayPal creates the so-called PayPal mafia. It's always called a mafia at the end of that. Like you have the Harvard mafia because you were at the Harvard Lampoon, which then everybody went to Hollywood. But it seems like PayPal spread out to form all these other companies. Even The Simpsons, a lot of people went on to do great shows, and most notably Conan O'Brien.
Conan was, there was no holding him back.
Like, could you see day one, oh my gosh, this guy's a phenomenon?
I knew it. I was out of college. I was working at National Lampoon in New York, and I got a call from Harvard Lampoon in Boston, and somebody said, we got a kid here I think you should see. And I mean, it was just to observe him, and I got on a train and went to Boston to meet Conan O'Brien, a 19-year-old kid who was just fully formed, the guy you've been seeing on TV for 25 years. He was just insanely funny and, kind of antic and manic, but also just a lovely guy and so smart. I mean, people can just see a couple of levels of the guy, but he's just a very erudite guy on top of all of that. And that was it. So I saw him there, and then 3 years later, I helped get him his first job, I think, at not necessarily the news. And then a few years later at The Simpsons, we had the same core writers for 4 years, and then people were starting to leave, and we go, how do we replace somebody, this slot? How do we fit someone into this team? And we brought in Conan, and he just took over. His first day, no shyness. He just took over the show, and it became the Conan show for the next couple of years.
Like he wrote his first pitch, right, became an episode.
Yes, he came in. He came in for a story retreat. This is where we figure out the stories that we're going to write about all the next year, and everyone comes in with a little 5-minute presentation, and if you didn't sell any stories, you were in a little bit of trouble.
You had nothing to do for the next year.
Yeah, and sometimes all you hoped to do was sell one, but maybe on a great day you could sell two. And Conan, it was like his first week on the job, sold 3 episodes. They were all great. One of them was the monorail show, and Al Jean and I were so clueless. We're running the show, and we said, pitch that one last because we don't think James L. Brooks is going to go for it. It's too weird. And it's my favorite episode ever. It was just so great.
I mean, and not to mention, how talent got a start, like Conan at The Simpsons, but you just mentioned James L. Brooks. This is a classic guy from sitcoms past, Mary Tyler Moore Show, and all the spin-offs of that. I mean, what was it like? I have a lot of what was it like doing, and then I'll get to The Simpsons. But what was it like working with such a comedic genius for decades before?
He was, I remember in college, I was watching Taxi. And
maybe the best sitcom ever.
Yeah. I'm watching the credits go, and I go, hey, this is the same gang of writers all the time. I remember these same names from Mary Tyler Moore, and they would go to MASH. And I remember thinking, I would love to be part of a pack of guys like that. And they're working under James L. Brooks. And, here it took about 8 years or so. And then suddenly I'm part of that pack. I'm working with those guys, working under Jim. And I was as great as I could have imagined.
So even though you had all these great experiences, like you had done The Tonight Show with Carson, you worked with Garry Shandling, you worked not necessarily the news, just when you were sitting in that room with James L. Brooks and all the writers for The Simpsons, what did you say, like, oh my gosh, this is the dream come true?
No, I can't.
Because you describe it in the book like, oh, this might not be bad for... No one knew whether The Simpsons would be good or not.
Nobody knew. No, I mean, I tell the story way too much, but it was... I got hired at The Simpsons because nobody else wanted the job. I was on the summer break from It's Garry Shandling Show, everybody's second favorite Garry Shandling sitcom, and it was very, a beloved cult classic. It was also the lowest rated show on TV. And Sam Simon called me. I was on a 3-month break. He said, "You want to work on The Simpsons?" I go, "Why are you calling me? I don't know you." And he says, "Everyone else has turned me down." So I went to work at The Simpsons, and I thought it was just the summer job. And one of our writers is Jake Hogan, and his father was an esteemed comedy writer who had written for Carol Burnett and Johnny Carson. And his father was begging him not to take The Simpsons job. It's weird to put yourself in that mindset, but it just seemed not only like a surefire loser of a show, but actual career poison. So I took The Simpsons job. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. And it was like any summer job where when my last summer job had been filing death certificates at John Hancock Insurance. And it was like that. It's like, well, I won't be doing this forever, so let's just have some fun. And that was it. And maybe that's the secret of the show, was just nobody, we said, no one's going to watch it. Let's just make this for us. And let's fill it with stuff we never get to see on TV any other way.
Well, I like you say, I think that's part of its charm. Like this, so just to set the context, this was the first primetime animated show since the Flintstones,
correct?
Right, when it came on the air. It was kind of a flagship for this fledgling network, Fox.
Yeah.
That and Married with Children, were sort of like the first known shows that really catapulted Fox, I think. And, and it was sort of obviously much more adult than the Flintstones. And you make the astute point that kids like the cartoonish aspect, but then they could watch with their parents who get the more blue aspect of the show.
Yeah, it was either going to be a show for everybody or nobody whatsoever. It's too smart for kids and a cartoon for adults. I think that was why people thought it just wasn't going to work.
But that became the formula for almost every kind of a successful cartoon show after that, including yours. You created, I forgot to mention, you created The Critic,
yes,
which I enjoyed, by the way. I remember that
you.
when I was waiting for that when that was about to launch. Like, I was so excited. And and then, of course, Family Guy and South Park have that both kid-style cartoon and adult-style humor. So it's a kind of a formula that was replicated.
It certainly, and it even goes back to the job I had, a couple of jobs right before Simpsons, was the show Alf. Alf with a puppet that looked like brown genitalia. And that was a show, we wrote it purely for adults because we knew it had a puppet in it. Kids were going to watch it regardless. So
that's interesting.
Yeah. And nobody goes back and rewatches old Alf's. But you'll see, we were doing a lot of stuff. There were a lot of pop culture references, and a lot of the tricks we used on The Simpsons, we had done there first.
I mean, you've said a lot repeatedly in the book and in interviews that you guys were just in the writer's room trying to make yourselves laugh,
right,
rather than focusing too much on the audience or awards. But I keep forgetting bio notes. You've won 4 Emmys. What's the process like when you're just trying to make each other laugh? Like, what does a day in the early Simpsons or even the now Simpsons life look like?
It's funny. People have been asking me about the first season, and I realized how scattered that was. We didn't even have a writer's room. None of us were there at the same time. And again, we worked in a trailer with terrible shag carpeting, and it was very low rent. And the scripts, the show became kind of a classic right away. The scripts were really just knocked out very quickly. Almost everyone who wrote those first season episodes had never written a half-hour script before. So
that's incredible.
It just shows you, it's something I've learned recently, which is it's not that hard to write TV. There's courses everywhere, how to write television, blah, blah, blah. And there's not that much to know. I think if you just watched a lot of TV when you were a kid, which I did, you sort of pick it up. And most of writing, no matter whether it's a play or a movie or a children's book, all the different things I've done, it just means make every line good. Never get lazy anywhere along the way.
But with The Simpsons, too, being a comedy, it's not only make every line good, it's you have to make a lot of those lines funny.
Right. And in the rewrite room, once we got to the second year, and the second year looks exactly like the 30th year. The process has been exactly the same, which is it's a bunch of writers sitting around a table. We have a script. Some poor soul has to write the original script. And then we go, all right, line one. Anyone got anything funnier? And everyone sits and pitches jokes. If something makes 60% of us laugh, it goes in the script. And then we go line two, line three.
So
and
what's a specific? Like, what? Give me like a first line for an episode that some people pitch, and then another first line one.
oh, that's a hard one. I do remember once the phone rings and we need a line. What does Homer say when he picks up the phone? And I was just sitting there. It was like for 2 hours. And I'm going, he says hello. Does everything have to be funny? But we're all sitting there pitching. And it's a hard joke to pitch. How do you pick up a phone? Hello. And I think he just said yellow. And that was good enough. And that actually became kind of a running trademark of him. But that is the process. I mean, a good one to remember is certainly when you see an Itchy and Scratchy cartoon, title card comes on for a second. It's just 1 second. And that's hours of work. I mean, it's just 8 people sitting around. And by now we've probably done 100 of those titles, so it gets harder every time. But we'll just keep sitting there throwing out notions till something perks us up. And there's no cheating, You can't go, it's good enough. It'll catch you sooner or later when you put in a half-baked joke.
Because the half hour or the animated format also lends itself to different kinds of joke telling. It's not just the characters telling jokes. You have stuff all happening in the background, the foreground,
Correct.
the sideground, and so every little thing, you're trying to fill up every corner with comedy to hit it, the many layers.
It's the downside. I love everything about animation, the freedom of it, the sort of liberation. The best thing about writing, having come from live action sitcoms, is you can insult the characters without insulting the actors. If Homer Simpson was a human being, some actor playing that part, you couldn't call him fat and ugly every week. The man has feelings. Nobody on Roseanne, that ran for 8 years. Nobody ever told Roseanne she was fat. She would insult everyone around her. Nobody would ever lash out at her because she's a human being and it was her show. But wow, can we hit Homer? And we hit him with everything we got.
Yeah, so I'm jealous. It must have just been the funnest job in the world, just to sit around telling jokes all day.
It's insanely pleasant. It's really nice. It's not crazy. Every couple of years they send a camera crew to film our writer's room, and they think, let's watch the fireworks. And it's just Jews thinking. It's not much different from the writing of the Talmud. It's just Jews deep in thought going, all right, what's a funny line? And then finally someone says something. It's not nonstop kibitzing and that kind of thing. It's a little bit of hard work. And when the joke comes, it's fun. And there's certainly, it's as great a way to make a living as anything. But, don't walk in and expect hell's a poppin'.
Now you describe the structure, the 4-act structure of a typical episode. Maybe just walk us through that and how important that is for each episode, or if it's not that important for each episode.
Yeah, it's really not that important. It was one thing I realized when I had my first sitcom job. I got hired. I'd worked enough to get a job on a sitcom, and writers would come in to pitch ideas for episodes, freelance writers. And they go, blah, 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 and this happens, and then the act break is this. And they'd always go, and the act break is this. And I'd been watching TV my whole life. I go, what is an act break? And I never realized, and I think most TV viewers don't realize, something big happens right before the first commercial that makes you hang in there and keep watching after the commercials. I mean, generally, if you watch commercial TV, which nobody does anymore, you watch the show, you're there for the half hour. You're not going anywhere, but every show has a planted big moment right before the commercial. And so The Simpsons has these arbitrary, we have 3 acts, and I think it was just to sell commercials. I think it came as a mandate from Fox. You have 3 acts so we can put more commercials in. And then after 25 years of mastering that form, they go, now you have 4 acts. And they added an extra act. It's a little tag at the end just to put in a couple more commercials. Now, Aristotle said great drama has 3 acts, but Fox knows better than Aristotle. So we have a lot more commercials. And as long as people hang in, we don't mind it because the show is 2 minutes shorter than it used to be. We used to fill 22 minutes a week, and now we only have to fill 20.
Is that in general across the board with primetime TV?
I would say with primetime network TV, yeah, it's 20 minutes as opposed to 22. But then now they're changing at both ends, too. They go, well, you're not going to have credit. You know, shows don't have theme songs anymore. That used to be the greatest part of TV. Opening credit sequences, theme songs. Nobody has those because the networks believe no one's going to sit through the same theme song every week.
Taxi.
Yeah.
Mary Tyler Moore Show.
Yeah.
Chico and the Man.
Yep. Everybody knows better. So they're giving you more commercials in the middle and nothing at both ends. Isn't that strange?
That's strange. So when you're coming up with like when you're deciding which episodes will be you should write, the writer should write, how do you know, okay, this is an idea where we could fill this up with jokes? Like, is there something you say, okay, Bart desperately wants something or Homer desperately needs something, so that premise will fill up the 20 minutes with jokes and he'll get his thing and blah, blah, blah?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. What you need is generally, and we, again, just the way we pitch jokes, we want the premises to make us laugh. So very often at one of these retreats, John Swartzwelder, one of our legendary writers, would come in and just go, my episode is entitled Bart Gets an Elephant. And we all go, okay, we get it. And then he would pitch a funny way. I mean, one thing The Simpsons does that a lot of shows that we invented, I think Sam Simon invented this, was the first act of the show, the first 10 minutes, has nothing to do with the rest of the show. You know, there's one episode starts off, Grandpa's very sick, he's going to die, so they go shopping for a gravestone, and then they realize the money they're spending on a gravestone could be used to build a tennis court, and that becomes our tennis episode. So the first 10 minutes is sick grandpa, and suddenly it's an episode about tennis, and you never see it coming. So everyone had to come in with a funny first act that would so tangentially and surprisingly lead to the premise of the rest of the episode.
So like Bart Gets an Elephant, what was the first act there? Or what did he pitch as the first act?
I think it was just a radio contest to get tickets to Krusty Land. I know the fans are going to know the episode much better than me, but I remember it was, I think it was a crooked radio contest where the DJs are saying, and win this prize, and you'll either get 2 tickets to Krusty Land or an elephant. And it was supposed to be a gag prize nobody would claim, but Bart wanted the elephant, and then he got the elephant. And the great Swartzwelder twist was the elephant was an asshole. It's a really bad elephant. There's nothing cute about him. There's nothing charming about him. He's just this hateful animal they have to live with and then find a way to get rid of.
What's when you say the word twist, did every episode require a twist?
Well, we just wanted to surprise people. There was a funny thing that used to happen, which was, again, it was such a brand new structure to have an opening that had nothing to do with the rest of the show. So actors would come in to do Walla. This means they would come in and make background noises and crowd noises for the animation, and they would show them the animation. You're doing crowd noises in this scene and this scene. And they would watch these very disparate scenes and go, wait a minute, you're making us do 3 different episodes for the price of one. And we go, nope, this is one show. It's just taking a lot of crazy turns.
Reminds me of like Louie. A lot of those episodes, the first 10 minutes had nothing to do with the rest of the show.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that.
And you mentioned in the book how one of the great things he did was make sure he had no notes from executives. Executives didn't even see the show before it aired in most cases. And I think you mentioned with The Simpsons, executives were not allowed on the set.
Yes, anyone, you can come, your daughter can come, watch us record The Simpsons. The president of Fox is not allowed in, has never been allowed in, doesn't know how it works. And it was a very special deal. Jim Brooks, only James L. Brooks could make this kind of deal with the network to say, give us the money, let us make the show and don't tell us how to do our jobs.
Why do studio executives think they can give, like, you're a team of, comic writers that have worked on so many sitcom shows, Carson, many seasons of The Simpsons. Why do executives even think they have the right to give notes?
I would guess it evolved. I don't want to say they're idiots, but I think it evolved naturally. And when I started working in TV in like 1983, I was on an ABC sitcom, and there were like 3 executives running the whole network. And they would just go from show to show to show, literally to see if are the writers drunk? Are they coked up? I mean, they were just sort of like police and just making sure everything was rolling along smoothly. So 3 running the whole network. And then I think cable came in, network audiences went down, the networks panicked and said, well, we better add more executives. We better help. And so they hired more and more executives. So 20 years after my first job, I'm back at ABC trying to do a sitcom. Now, in the old days, 3 executives ran the whole network. 20 years later, I had 11 executives full-time on my TV show.
The Critic?
No, I wish. It was
Angel?
Teen Angel. It was a show, 11 people telling me how to do my job. And I had pretty good credits at this point, having done The Simpsons and The Critic. 11 people just meddling in the creative process. And by the end of this process, a show came out every week, and I go, I hate this show. I go, I can't even watch this, and my name's on it 3 times. How can I expect the public to watch it? There's a story I tell in the book I love, which was a friend of mine was developing a sitcom, I think for Whoopi Goldberg. It was a very big star, was going to do a sitcom. And when you have a big star who wants to do TV, these executives come out of the woodwork. So I'm complaining about 11 executives. This guy, every move he made trying to develop this show, he had to consult with 45 network executives. Every time he changed the page of the script, he had to send out scripts to 45 executives. And this is no joke. I look at the list, and I'm looking at it, and I go, 3 of these people are dead. He goes, I know. And I said, and you still have to send the scripts to 3 dead people? And he says, yes. I said, what do you think of that? He goes, I wish more of them were dead.
So I wanna reel back a little bit to Carson, who, the king of late night, basically the not that he started the genre, but he really kind of, brought it into every family's home. And you were there during some of his last years. You were writing 60 jokes a day for his monologue. He would have 300 jokes altogether and finally pick 12. First off, how do you write 60 jokes a day?
Well, 50 of them are terrible. That's how you do it. It would kill me on a daily basis that I wish I could have crafted 15 good jokes, but no, I had a number I had to hit, and usually there were about 10 good ones and 50 stinkers, just formulaic jokes, kind of word soup, where you just throw in a bunch of funny words like Pasadena and Pacoima and I don't know, Geritol, whatever. You remember these kind of classic jokes from Carson that weren't jokes at all. It's just, may Geritol go in your camel's hiney. And it was like, that's not a joke. Those are just words. So we would write these jokes, and there was no guarantee that he'd pick the good ones. 300 jokes were generated. The head writer would narrow that down to 18 jokes. Of those, Carson would pick 12 of the 18, and usually 4 of them would suck. 4 would bomb every night, and, I'll bet there were better jokes in there. But, it wasn't my job. My job was just to crank them out. And there's a story I love. I tell it in the book where we were doing Karnak. Is the most famous Carson bit. And again, I know one of the jokes I turned in just couldn't have been worse. I'm just trying to hit the quota. And the joke, which I won't even bother to explain for young people who don't get it, joke was Red Square. And the answer was, what do you call that blotch on Gorbachev's head? Terrible joke, right?
I actually laughed when I read it in the book. I laughed out loud.
Well, there you go. 1 in a row. So So this joke somehow makes the cut, and Johnny does it as Karnak, Red Square, blah, blah, blah. And it didn't just bomb. To bomb is the audience not liking it. They just had no idea it was a joke. They didn't know. They're sitting there still waiting for the punchline. And I go, this is terrible. I thought,
What is it they didn't know? They didn't know Red Square? I mean, they all knew at that time
Gorbachev. It just doesn't it doesn't have the rhythm of a joke. What do you call that blotch on Gorbachev's head? Blah, 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 blah. It just is hanging there. And it's sort of just, okay, he's got a red square on his head. So what? Oh, it's a birthmark. I don't know. It's not a great joke. So it dies so badly, right? So 6 months later, Johnny's doing Karnak again. And through some horrible clerical error, they've given him the same joke, the red square joke. And he goes on, and I think, I'm doomed. I saw it on the cue cards. I go, this is the end of me. He does the joke, and it killed. It got this giant laugh. And I go, all right. It was a moment I'll never forget where I just go, there's no science to this. There's no rules of comedy.
You know what I love about fantasy sports is that even though I'm not going to be a great basketball player or a baseball player or a football player or whatever, I feel like I get to participate and make decisions and use my knowledge of these different leagues or these different sports to compete. So it's like I can pick my team or I can pick my favorite players, and I could use my knowledge to make predictions and maybe even make money. So with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League on Prize Picks. This is a league created specifically for combo projections that include two or more players from different sports or leagues. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, who's also been a guest on this podcast, and I've been a guest on his? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries for some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Look, Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. What? So, I love playing it. I love anywhere where I can use analytical ability with my interests to demonstrate some skill and maybe make some money. And I like the game-like aspect. I do wish they had chess as a category on prizepicks.com, but I'll settle for what they've got. Maybe I should make my own fantasy chess league. But in any case, I love Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/James. Use code James for a first deposit match up to $100. That's the easiest $100 you're ever going to make. So that's prizepicks.com/James and use code James. Daily fantasy sports made easy. The future of learning is definitely online. Like, it's such BS that you have to spend $200,000 or take $200,000 in loans and go to some fancy school when it's useless. It doesn't guarantee you a job. Most employers, including me, do not care about degrees or grades or anything like that. We want to care that you love what you're doing, that you know what you're doing, in some cases that you have experience or that you're willing to learn. But people in general love learning and are curious. Like, the key to success is curiosity. And I think masterclass.com is the perfect model for online learning. I'm really happy they're sponsoring this episode. If you're going to give a gift, give the gift of learning. Masterclass makes a meaningful gift this season for you and anyone on your list, because both of you can learn from the best to become your best, from leadership to effective communication to cooking. Let me tell you some of the classes I've taken. I've taken comedy from Steve Martin. I mean, can you believe I can take a class from Steve Martin on comedy, or Judd Apatow, my favorite comedy director? I could take an actual class from him on writing. Wolfgang Puck on cooking. Dan Brown on writing, or Judy Bloom, who's been on this podcast, on writing. By the way, Wolfgang Puck also has been on this podcast. It's such a pleasure. I try to take classes all the time from masterclass.com. And whether you're watching Masterclass on TV or listening in audio mode in the app or on their site, the quality speaks for itself. It's like these Masterclass instructors are your own personal mentors that are going to help you reach the next level. How much would it cost to take one-on-one classes on comedy from Steve Martin or on chess from Garry Kasparov? You just wouldn't be able to do it. But it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. With a Masterclass annual membership, it's $10 a month. Memberships start at $120 a year for unlimited access to one-on-one classes with all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. So it's not just $120 for one instructor. You get all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. Boost your confidence and find practical takeaways you can apply to your life and at work. And if you own a business or are a team leader, use Masterclass to empower and create future-ready employees and leaders. That's the real education in today's world. So this holiday season, you can give one annual membership and get one free at masterclass.com/JAS. JAS, of course, stands for the James Altucher Show. So right now you can get 2 memberships for the price of one at masterclass.com/JAS. Masterclass.com/JAS. Offer terms apply.
AI might be the most important new computer technology ever. It's storming every industry and literally billions of dollars are being invested. So buckle up. The problem is that AI needs a lot of speed and processing power, so how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? It's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. OCI has 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, offers one consistent price instead of variable regional pricing, and of course, nobody does data better than Oracle. So now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and less than half the cost of other clouds. If you want to do more and spend less, like Uber, 8x8, and Databricks Mosaic, take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/advance. That's oracle.com/advance. Oracle.com/advance.
Okay, so, and you mentioned that in the book, and I think you quote a bunch of books. You actually give very good book recommendations, which we'll talk about in a bit. But you basically say what you just said. There's no real rules to comedy. It's not something you could take a class to learn. I'm wondering, though, like when I watch well, first off, when I read you, and then when I watch your interviews and talks that you've given, you tell a lot of jokes in those talks, and they're very classic joke structure. You'll use the rule of 3 where, you'll say, I went to Harvard because of A, B, and then C will be something ridiculous. Or you'll use reversals, or you use the punchlines are always something you would never expect. Like, so you have your own formulas that you use.
Over and over, yes.
So, like, what are some of those... And you were just describing the Simpsons scripts, the twists and the, how can you answer a telephone in an unexpected way? It does seem like putting extra mental energy behind what's the unexpected that could happen here is important for a line to be funny.
Yeah, the unexpected helps, but it's not enough. It's not, you can't just go, and I opened my drawer and there was a shark in there. That's not a joke. It needs something more. And jokes are all so different. I have a theory on jokes, though, and I think I put it in the book, which is a joke is like a mystery story where there's a lot of weird elements. You go, what is all of this? It's just some weird world. And then the punchline comes and everything makes sense. And it may not be logical sense, but all the pieces come together. And the example I use is Duck walks into a pharmacy and says, I'd like some chapstick. And the druggist says, how will you pay for that? And he says, put it on my bill. Right? Okay, now I get it. That's why he wanted chapstick. And, there's so many unanswered questions in that joke. First of all, a duck doesn't have lips. Why does he need chapstick? And the druggist doesn't go, why is a duck talking? All he cares about is how is he going to pay for it? And then, but once you hear Bill, which again, it's not logical, it's a pun, you go, I get it. All right, the joke is finished. And a good joke, a working formula of a joke, when it's over, nobody goes, and then what happened? But Red Square is that kind of joke. What do you call that blotch on Gorbachev's head? Yeah, and then what? What do you mean? Why are you saying that? So not a good joke.
So what's I'm just obsessed with the discipline you did of making 60 jokes a day for Carson, because that must have built up all your discipline for the future writing on The Simpsons and so on. Again, you would sit down. You had kind of like your basic tool chest of what makes a joke. You had the maybe the news headlines in front of you because he was somewhat topical,
Right?
Although not political. What would you start thinking about?
We would certainly use, I'm embarrassed to say it, Al Jean and I, my writing partner, I don't think he's come up once, but I worked with him very closely for 16 years. Now he's my boss at The Simpsons.
And you were showrunners together on those seasons?
Yeah, he's my best friend in the world. He was my roommate in college, best man at my wedding. Yeah, a dear, dear friend. But again, it was just numbers. We would sit in the Carson office, and I think we had an actual list of funny words. And, they would, the Sizzler Steakhouse was funny. Kmart was funny. Things like that. Funny towns. I remember driving around in L.A., I would look at the freeway signs and go, oh, Azusa, that's a funny name. Pacoima, wow, I haven't heard that one. And so I think it was always at least a mental list of things that churn through, just funny words to get to. And it may have been at some points a literal list. Okay, what's our joke, that deals with the Sizzler Steakhouse? And then they would wear themselves out, and you had to find new funny words.
Like I'm not. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but like, let's say today you were writing jokes for a new Carson, Jimmy Fallon or whoever, and the Melania Trump jacket, which was in the news a few days ago. I forgot what it said. I don't care. Do you? Something like that.
Right.
She's going to see the kids who are being detained. How would you take something like that and make a joke?
I don't know. You're putting
putting
me
you
on
the spot.
I mean, this is the reason, we had the discussion before we went on that you're saying I'm like a comedian. No, the difference between me and a comedian is 45 seconds. If you ask that to a comedian, he'd come up with something. I would have to go, let's stop tape for a minute. I'll come back and give you something pretty good. So that's it. I am a writer, and I need a little time to think, and I don't work under pressure. But I know I would have to come up with 10 jokes about Melania Trump's jacket. So that's it.
And it's funny because when you watch your Harvard 25th reunion speech, it's basically that's what you did. You come up with all these jokes about Harvard and the reunion, even some inside jokes, which I start to piece together just because the context. And they all have a very much a classic joke structure.
I go to those structures. There's the kind of joke I love, and I do a lot of them, and they're not so easy, which is it's the straightforward sentence, and then everything's turned around by the next phrase, and then everything's turned around by the next phrase. For example, I come out, when I give a speech, it always starts off, I only have one opening. I go, hiya, folks, we're going to have a lot of fun over the next 6 or 7 hours. Twist, and then I go, that's just the joke. It won't be fun at all. So that's it. I love tagging a line with extra information that turns it around.
What's another one? I want to steal all these. What's another one?
Oh, okay. Well, you're putting me on the spot again. I remember doing a joke about, this was a pretty successful play by Broadway standards. It only lost $6 million the first week. So,
all right.
They're all the same joke.
There was one talk you gave. It might have even been the Harvard tour. It might have been a different one. You compared something to phone sex versus real sex.
Oh, that's a good joke.
And then you had the next line, which was very funny. And then, so what was that?
Oh, that's a joke. I say it's right on topic.
Very classic.
I say I am a comedian. I am a comedy writer, not a comedian. It's the difference. It's like the difference between phone sex and real sex. You know the difference between phone sex and real sex. One is just a hollow, empty, degrading experience, and the other one really runs up your phone bill. And then, in my case, it's $20 for 4 minutes either way. So that's it. The joke is that, you can always go a little further.
It's just like reversals and the unexpected and,
So we are this close to having a computer program that can do what I do. And I'm afraid it's only going to be like 5 lines of code.
I don't know. That seems it's hard to come up with. It's not so easy. The simpler it is, the harder it is to come up with. It's like the Mark Twain expression. I would have made this letter shorter, but I didn't have enough time.
Right.
So
great line too. He could have worked he could have written for Colbert. He had a lot of great one-liners. And in fact, he's like me. We're talking about, I'm not sure if we gave any background on this, the fact that I lecture all over the world on The Simpsons. And you were saying it's a 1-hour speech. I stand behind a podium. I have notes, but it's just stand-up. It's just a lot of these jokes I've been telling today. And the podium makes all the difference. If I came out as a stand-up, they go, well, this is a pretty half-assed stand-up. But the audiences always go, well, this is funny for a lecture. Wow, there's a lot of jokes in this lecture. And it's great to lower expectations that way. And Mark Twain did just that. He went bankrupt. He was a wonderful writer, so prolific. He lost all his money in bad investments and went on the lecture tour. And, well, Hal Holbrook went on for years doing Mark Twain because it was stand-up. He's really, really funny. And the guy could write a one-liner.
Well, you say it's when you give these talks, it's not stand-up, even though it's
I'm standing up. Yeah.
You're standing up and you're telling jokes one after the other. Now about a topic like The Simpsons, and sometimes you veer into a tangent, but always bring it back. But I don't know. Why do you think if you did those jokes on a stand-up stage, it wouldn't work? They're funny jokes.
They might work. I don't know. There's a comfort level, and again, I really think the podium lowers expectations. So things are a little funny. It's like, professors are always getting laughs with jokes that an actual comedian would never get laughs with. Or improv. I got to say, I hate improv, and it's everywhere. And I've laughed at improv shows. I've been impressed, but I go, if you put this on and said, this is a scripted show, no one would laugh because improv is only funny because, wow, they came up with that so fast. Oh, they came up with that on the spot. I don't think it's ever funny on its own.
Given all your experience writing sitcoms and The Simpsons and what you just said about improv, what do you think about a show like Curb Your Enthusiasm, which is just basically a list of notes and then improv in between?
Well, that's almost a trick. It shows you what drudgery writing is that Larry David does everything but type up a script. And he works out these beautiful stories. I've heard they're very dense scripts of story beats. And if they just recorded the first thing anybody said, that would be improv. That would be like going to an improv club. But what they do is they run the scene. If something's funny, they go, okay, let's do another take. Make sure you say that line. And they'll do it again. And now they have 2 funny lines or 3 funny lines. And really, that's just writing. I mean, that's what we do in a writer's room. We just keep throwing out lines till we find something that sticks. It's just another kind of writing, but that is not improv. It's a writing process.
So if someone, let's say you were, showrunner for The Simpsons. If someone was pitching you to be a writer on the show, what would you mentioned a little bit they would write spec scripts and pitch them. You read 700 or 800 spec scripts, but what would really impress you? What would you say? What would make you say, man, I have to have this guy writing for my show?
It would be...
Or a woman writing for my show.
Yes. Oh, very good. Nice catch. A woman or man of any color or sexual orientation.
You want them on your show.
Yes, I want them. So the script had to be a bunch of things. And I would hire people just on the script. I wouldn't meet them. And so it would be a surprise. Someone would come in. I go, oh, how about that? You're an old Asian man, or you're 2 young women. Because you don't look at this title page, or even if you did, you've forgotten it by the time you get to the script. So it was really blind hiring to find people that way. But the script had to be funny on the first page, and very important, it had to be funny by the end. I read so many scripts that just lost it in the last 4 or 5 pages, and I go, oh, you are not a closer. You are not you have sloppy work habits. It had to be, the spelling had to be right. It had to be cleanly typed. I want a hard worker too. But mostly, again, so it had to be funny all the way through, but you had to surprise me with the story. You had to pitch a story. And again, we never hire anyone at Simpsons off of a Simpsons spec script. In my day, when I read 800 scripts a year, I read 400 Seinfelds and 300 Cheerses. And it had to be a premise that I go, wow, I never thought of that. That's really clever. But it also had to fit the show. I wanted it always to be doable and believable.
What would be like an example of one that won you over?
There was a really good one. I hired these guys, and they wound up replacing me at The Simpsons. These guys, Oakley and Weinstein, wrote a script. It was a Seinfeld episode where they go to a murder mystery party, I think it was, and George Costanza's there. He's drinking wine, and I think he bites down on the wine glass and swallows a piece of glass. And so everyone's there going, will the glass pass through him safely, or will he get sick and start coughing up blood? So everyone stays at the party for 8 hours waiting for George to poop. And it's just the most, they talk about cringe comedy. What could be more embarrassing than you've wrecked a party and everyone's staying there just waiting for you to go to the bathroom? And it was just funny. And wow, not the first idea that would occur to anyone. I don't know how they came up with it.
And then you mentioned, or not you didn't mention, but Judd Apatow in the forward mentions how he sent you a spec script, I guess, for The Simpsons.
Yeah.
And then you ended up hiring him for The Critic. And
Yes.
Judd Apatow, of course, has made a trillion super funny movies. Plus wrote this great book, which you mentioned, Sick in the Head.
Yeah.
Best book on comedy. What was his spec script like?
It was a really good idea. And I don't remember it well, but I know it, I remember it. The script came in too late. We had already made our last hire for the year. And then I'm reading Judd's script, and it was funny. The guy can write jokes and lots of jokes. I mean, it's one reason I love his movies. You go there and you see a lot of jokes, and you remember 10 or 20 years before, you would see these Chevy Chase movies and be long stretches where nothing was funny. There would be really lame bits. Richard Pryor, a lot of comedians were just phoning it in and taking paychecks for years. And then here's a Judd Apatow movie, joke. But his premise was pretty good, that Homer, I think, is hypnotized at a nightclub, and they make him think he's a 10-year-old boy, and then the hypnotist has a heart attack, and so Homer is stuck being a 10-year-old boy. So kind of a funny comedy premise. But what made it great was now Bart suddenly has a brother. He's got a 10-year-old boy in the house instead of his antagonistic father. He's got another 10-year-old kid to hang around with, and it's so sweet and heartwarming, and just sort of, it has that great observation. Oh, Bart doesn't have a brother. Well, Lisa has a sister.
It's classic Judd Apatow too. The brother, the bromance type.
Yeah,
of movie.
bromance, exactly. So it was a much better script than you might think, hearing the premise, and he takes it in emotional ways, which is really nice. And then a very sad ending where they find the hypnotist. He comes out of a coma, and he's going to bring Homer back to being a 39-year-old man, and Bart's going to lose his brother. That's sort of touching. That's sort of heartbreaking to see.
So one level further, if someone was pitching you, let's say you were at a network or a TV company, and
Oh, God,
someone was
me.
pitching you a show, what would you look for? A sitcom show.
That, thank God, I just don't do that anymore. I can't bear the process.
Because you would pitch shows.
Yeah, I pitch shows. We talked about Teen Angel. And Teen Angel, I had a deal with Disney Television. And Al Jean and I this was a thing back in the day, back in the 90s. I guess there was a thing called a development deal. They'd pay you a lot of money just to generate sitcom ideas. And if they liked an idea, they would turn it into a sitcom. And every kind of prestigious writer had one of these deals. And nothing good came out of any of them. And a lot of people would just take the deal, and they knew it was a dead end, and they just go golfing. But Al and I are hard workers, And every week we'd go to Disney. Here's our 5 new ideas for sitcoms. And they just go, no, no, no. And we'd be back the next week, 5 more. And we could see Disney was getting sick of seeing us. And it's like, but this is our job. This is what you're paying us to do. So finally, we're coming to the end of a 3-year deal. Nothing has worked. Nothing has stuck.
Do you feel at the end of those 3 years where nothing has been happening, and given your success with such an iconic almost brand now, like The Simpsons. I mean, there's Simpsons, lingerie practically. Like every product really branded Simpsons. Did you start to feel irrelevant, or what was like a low moment during those 3 years? I feel like a low moment must have happened.
The low moment happened the day we got them picked up, which was Al and I finally go, all right, the creative approach is not working. Let's try the hack approach. And the hack approach was, let's take 2 different hit shows and combine them into something new. So at the time, the 2 hits on the air that especially young people liked were Sabrina the Teenage Witch.
And Nell Scovell. She's been on the podcast.
Has she been in here? Of course. Yeah. Everywhere I go, Nell has been warming my seat.
Because her book came out just a month before yours.
Yeah, it was very funny. We're very good friends. We didn't know we were each writing a book. And they're not only coming out from the same publisher, it's the same tiny imprint put out both books. So that was it. She was there 3 months ahead of me, and I'm just following in her wake now. But so she had made Sabrina the Teenage Witch. It was a new hit show. And the other hit that had just come on was Beavis and Butthead. So we go into Disney. Here's our hack pitch. How about Sabrina the Teenage Witch mixed with Beavis and Butthead? And they go, we love it, except for the Beavis and Butthead. So we said, so you just want Sabrina? They go, yeah. So that was it. That was Teen Angel. It became it was
like a male Sabrina.
Yeah, a male Sabrina. And instead of a witch, he was a bad angel. And, it was sort of doomed from there on in. It was just sort of a
but
lame.
I kind of like that premise.
Yeah. Well, we tried our best. We had really good writers. We had an amazing team of young writers that you could never reassemble. They've gone on to do much better things. They went off after doing this terrible show. They went off and did Frasier and Psych, and some came to The Simpsons, and some went to Family Guy. It was so it wasn't the writing, but it's a good lesson you can learn in TV, which is good writing can never overcome a crappy premise. The premise is everything. And Roseanne was a great example. The old Roseanne. And everyone knew the stories of Roseanne. She would fire the writers every year. It was a miserable place. She would hire comedians who'd never written anything, and that would be her staff. And yet that show was great year after year for at least 6 years because the premise was so strong. The actors, the characters were so good.
What would you say is the premise of Roseanne?
It was just a good, realistic look at a blue-collar family. That was it. It was just something you hadn't quite seen before. Maybe All in the Family. But it was funny to see blue-collar family treated with dignity. They were not educated people, but they were very smart people, which I really loved. Roseanne and Tom and Dan were both very bright people making bright remarks. They just didn't go to college. So that was a great show. And mind you, Roseanne is on the show. This is the gold standard of TV. It was the number 1 show on TV. And I'm going to Disney, and I go, well, we want to pitch a show about blah, blah, blah. And they go, no, nobody wants to see. No, they said, people only want to see attractive people on sitcoms. So this won't work. I go, Roseanne and Dan, this is an elephant married to a hippopotamus that they just didn't buy. They didn't know it was their own network, too. It's like, it's the number 1 show on your network. They're not attractive. How can you say something like that? And another one we would run up against, we would say, oh, we want to do, this kills me. It just now occurred to me. We said, we want to do a show about a think tank with a bunch of geniuses all living together in an apartment. And they said, nobody wants to see smart people on TV. Now, Frasier was like the number 2 show on TV.
Big Bang Theory.
But it was Big Bang Theory. It didn't hit me till this second. We had gone in 10 years before and pitched Big Bang Theory, and they turned it down.
So it sort of shows nobody really knows what they're doing, and I kind of find that across every industry,
Yes, yeah, it's
like economics or I don't know, every industry basically.
there was a chalkboard Al Jean pitched for The Simpsons. Bart's writing on the chalkboard, every business is exactly like show business. So, as opposed to there's no business like show business. So, yes, everybody puts up with this nonsense, but it's what made network TV so hard was people telling you how to do your jobs. And this is why TV's great now. This is why Netflix is so great and HBO is great. Every once in a while I need to write a joke about a bad TV show like My Mother the Car, and there's no modern reference. There are no bad TV shows anymore. You can't think of one that everyone goes, "Oh, that stinks." And
That's because they get canceled so fast. They don't really get in the cultural memory.
Good. Yeah. And there's just so much good TV. And why? It's because the Netflix model, the HBO model is let's bring in people we respect. If we like their idea, we sit back and let them make their show. How simple is that?
Yeah, and I guess HBO kind of had this guiding, Chris Albrecht was head of original programming. He started off as a stand-up comedian. So he sort of respected the comedy process. And then he, HBO, we were talking about hotspots earlier, like how The Simpsons incubated all this talent. HBO incubated a lot of executive talent that ended up at the other networks in charge of their original programming.
How about that? Now, mind you, too, there's no, Harvard and the Harvard Lampoon has produced so many great comedy writers. There's nothing inherently funny about Harvard. It's one of the most dismal places in the world. You just need an entry. You need a point of access. Generally, you need someone to get in to open the door to his friends and his colleagues. So there's a Minneapolis mafia, too. And there's just a lot of people. Someone broke in.
Is that because The Onion was there? Did you have Megan Amron on The Simpsons, right?
Yes, Megan was there. That was in Madison, Wisconsin. But yeah, there's a Madison, Wisconsin mafia, too. And it shows you no place is funnier than the other. It's just sort of, if you give people a place to be funny, the funny people will come there. And if one of them makes it in Hollywood, he can recommend his friends.
So one thing that The Simpsons sort of defined, and again, many animated shows later sort of took up this formula, you're able to parody everything.
Right.
Like you can't like parody Star Wars with the Brady Bunch, for instance, but you could parody Star Wars with every single animated show out there.
Correct.
I'm just using that as a broad example, but I don't think The Simpsons ever parodied it. I know Family Guy.
Star Wars? No, we've done it to bits.
Okay.
We've done it, and Family Guy has just made a little franchise of it.
Yeah.
They did part 1 was a full episode, part 2. They've done 3 1-hour episode parodies of different Star Wars movies. It's a rich area.
Yeah, so like how would you approach a parody different than other scripts? Like you would kind of have to staple yourself to different elements of the original, thing you're parodying?
With parody, well, it's funny. I'm going to contradict what was in my head, so I should just shut my mouth and say the second thing that came to me, which is you parody sometimes what you want to parody, what you know and understand. For example, on The Simpsons, we've done 50 parodies of Citizen Kane. I think you could assemble Citizen Kane with our parodies. We've done every scene in it, and yet we don't expect the kids in the audience to know Citizen Kane. They haven't seen the movie, and now, even college students don't see Citizen Kane. Right. It's an 80-year-old black and white movie. They don't know that movie. But we do it anyhow, and the kids like it anyhow. The kids like it because they know something's going on here that I'm not getting. And I remember that as a kid watching Rocky and Bullwinkle. Rocky and Bullwinkle when I was a little kid, when you were a kid. That was our Simpsons. You would watch it, and a lot of the jokes were going over your head, but you had a nice sense, they're not talking down to me. This is not a dumb kid show.
Well, I think part of the idea is, like, take Citizen Kane as a great example. As you say, it's been around for 80 years. So I'm sure plenty of movies were made 80 years ago. Citizen Kane's the only one we can remember off the top of our heads. So it's sort of withstood the test of time, which means even if you don't remember Citizen Kane, the premise and the scenes and the emotions of it resonate somehow primally.
Right. Yeah, there's certainly, I just don't ask me to name them, but there are certainly a lot of big successful movies that don't get parodied because there's nothing solid, to sink your teeth into, to make fun of. They're perfectly great movies. Terms of Endearment, classic movie, won the Oscar, or Spotlight. Let's say Spotlight, Oscar-winning Best Picture, great movie. How would you parody it? What's that memorable scene or image? So, you can make fun of superhero movies. It's easier to make fun of Thor than Spotlight.
That's funny. So the other thing you did a lot of, which it seems like there was a lot of techniques to kind of get viewers invested, like let's say a parody show or a guest star show. So you had a lot of famous celebrities on the show.
Yeah.
I mean, just as a side question, you've had every celebrity, but I'm particularly intrigued. You had Thomas Pynchon, who was famously very J.D. Salinger-like. No one even saw what a photo of him looked like. So to put it in context, he was a genius author, wrote Gravity's Rainbow and V and a bunch of other books, and then totally disappeared. Right. And I think it was the National Book Award. He wins it and sends a fake version of himself to pick up the award. He sent
Professor Irwin Corey to accept for him, which is hilarious. And
I don't even know who that is.
You don't know Professor Irwin Corey? Oh, he was a famous comedian in the 60s and 70s where he would come out as a crazy professor, and he just died at like age 107, and very funny comedian because I've seen him. He would go out and just wing it, just talk nonsense. It was just double talk and nonsense, and it sounded erudite, but it didn't make any sense. But occasionally there'd be jokes in there. He was real one-of-a-kind performer. So that's who Thomas Pynchon sent to accept his National Book Award.
So how did you? Because in a prior life, I even asked Thomas Pynchon to do. I used to work at HBO. I asked Thomas Pynchon to do something. He said no.
Yeah.
How did you? Of course, The Simpsons was much more iconic than whatever I was doing. But how did you get Thomas Pynchon to say yes to the first thing he ever said yes to?
I'm almost certain he came to us. I think he came to us because even though he's one of the most celebrated authors in the world, I think his kids didn't know who he was. So because he had young kids, and he goes, if I go on The Simpsons, that'll impress them. So this is the version I heard. I was not around for it, but so he calls up, I want to do The Simpsons, and they said, okay, how do you want us to draw you? Nobody knows how you look. He said, put a bag on my head. And that was the character. And they wrote a part for him, and they flew to New York to record him, and everybody loved him. I wasn't on that trip.
What did they love about him? He was just nice guy.
Just nice. He was, I think I'm going to even name the guy because he's dead. They recorded Thomas Pynchon and I think Tom Clancy in the same day, and nobody liked Tom Clancy, and everyone just loved this genial, funny Thomas Pynchon. So they recorded him. We go back to L.A., we do the show, and Thomas Pynchon calls back, says, I want to do it again. And so we wrote him another part, flew to New York, and he wrote jokes for the episode. He punched up our script.
They were funny?
Honor. Yeah, they were amazing. They were the kind of jokes you'd never submit to him because he said, I'm Thomas Pynchon. I'm turning all my famous novels into cookbooks, and there's like the frying of Latka 49. Something like that. It was great, weird, punny jokes that he wrote for the show.
And so you get all these guest stars because obviously they have this, not only this star presence, but name recognition, and they have acting skills. So you know that even if they're not voice actors, they're still going to have some presence and power with their voice. And this is sort of a naive question, but what makes a star? Like, you saw all these guest stars and they're still stars, even though they're kind of hidden by the layer of animation, but their star power still comes through. What makes someone a star?
Oh, that's way out of my field. The one thing I'll tell you though, which you probably never occurred to you, is our audience is much bigger overseas than in America. We've got America, and they love us in English-speaking countries. And Britain loves the show. Nobody loves us more than Australians. But most of the world sees the show dubbed. So even though we got Mick Jagger or Tony Blair, they're just seeing some local actor dubbing it into Spanish. And I visited these countries, and they have no idea we have big celebrities on the show. They have no idea we got the actual people because they don't get to hear them. So I think it's a gimmick of the show. Very often we use it as a toy. We go, who do we want to meet? And we'll go, all right, let's write them into the script. And the classic example is the one where Homer goes into space, right? Homer becomes an astronaut. So we get Buzz Aldrin for the episode. Makes sense. But we also got James Taylor. He's in that episode too. Why? We wanted to meet James Taylor. And he came in, and he was a great sport, and he became a friend of the show.
Do you find that most of these guest stars were actually very friendly and nice and
wonderful? I can say I probably shouldn't have done it. Out of 800 guest stars, there's 3 people didn't like. I named one of them. And then the other one was a famous comedic actor that just nobody really went for, and an athlete. So 3 out of 800 very famous people were difficult. The rest of them love it. It's, they don't even have to come in. It takes 10 minutes to record a Simpsons roll. We'll come to your house to do it. Now we can do it over satellite phones. We recorded Magic Johnson in his car. So
and the audio quality was fine for TV?
Fine. Yeah, nobody ever noticed. So you'd have to be a super prima donna to complain about your treatment on The Simpsons, because it's 10 minutes of your time anytime you want to do it, from anywhere you want to do it. You don't even have to put on clothes to do it. So they love it. But most of them, I would say 95% of them, come into the studio because they're excited too. They want to see the voices of Homer and Bart and Lisa and Maggie and Marge.
So, look, you've written this book, Springfield Confidential. I'm going to read the subtitle. I always forget the subtitle. Springfield Confidential, Jokes, Secrets, and Outright Lies from a Lifetime Writing for The Simpsons. Mike Reiss with your co-author Matthew Klickstein, forward by Judd Apatow. What's next for you? And I should mention, I mentioned earlier, but 17 children's books, like you're a huge children's book writer.
Yep. And I have another children's book coming out in about a year, about a turtle and a tortoise. I have 2 plays. This is the newest. The book was this strange detour that just came to me. And, I've only got one life, so I've only got one memoir in me. But I've been writing plays, which I really love, just because for good or for ill, the writer is in complete control of the play. And I've had a little luck, and I have 2 plays that we'll be playing this summer. I like to say they're off Broadway, and they're way off Broadway. One's in Colorado and one's in Utah. But that's the newest thing that keeps me entertained, and I must enjoy it because there's no pay in it at all. So it's just a lot of fun.
And is that, do you keep yourself, I mean, obviously you've done well with The Simpsons and all of your projects. Does that keep you motivated, like new types of writing projects, hitting new genres that you haven't hit before?
I'm very lucky in that I work 1 day a week at The Simpsons now. I live in New York, and I still fly to L.A. every Wednesday. I work 1 day as a consultant, and that's my choice because I don't think I have 2 days of Simpsons creativity left in me every week. I've been doing it a long time. I love to go in there. But the rest of the time I go, I don't have to do anything if I don't want to. I've worked a long time and I save my money. And so now anything I do it just because it tickles me, because it's fun. And no one can make me do what I don't want to do, which is, that was the lesson I learned from Teen Angel. It's just I can't go through that anymore. And,
well, it sounds like that's the lesson you learned from The Simpsons, because you guys wrote those shows just to make yourselves laugh.
Yeah.
Not knowing at all. It's this whole idea of the process was more important than the outcome. You guys focused very much on the process because you had no idea whether the show would even last.
Exactly. There was an interesting time. For years, TV just had 3 networks. And as a result, there weren't that many sitcom writer jobs. I'll put a number on. Let's say there were 200 people working in sitcoms on 3 networks. And then suddenly it expanded. There were 6 networks And so suddenly a lot of people poured into the business who had no business being sitcom writers. They were going because, there's job openings and here's money to be made. And there were a lot of guys I know quit business school to become sitcom writers. So they all move in on this gold rush. And then the business shrank again because reality TV came in and quiz shows, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire came in. And suddenly there weren't a bunch of sitcom jobs anymore. And all those guys who came in just for the money, just for the career, were the first guys to get fired because it wasn't what they were born to do. It wasn't their passion. It was just a job to them. And the people who stay and keep working in TV, it's partly, this is what we were born for. There's something terribly, terribly wrong with us that we just make jokes all the time and we're not good for anything else whatsoever.
Now there must be tens of thousands of jobs between Netflix, Hulu, Amazon. I mean, do you think there's a glut now of shows out there?
No. Part of it is, even though there's a lot of shows, they're not doing full seasons. They're doing 10 episodes in 2 years. So I don't think there's that many more writers working to fill those jobs. And I see the same 6 or 7 writers are just jumping around. They'll work on Veep, and then they'll go to Silicon Valley when Veep is done. So there is a glut. I feel bad that every once in a while you see a really great show, and there's just too much stuff out there, and nobody gets around to it. I'll give you an example, which was, I think FX had a show called The Comedians, and it starred Billy Crystal and Josh Gad.
Excellent show.
Excellent show. You know what? The pilot was bad. Everyone agreed the pilot was not good, and so people watched the first one and bailed, and then it got so great, but it's too late, too competitive out there. Nobody stuck around for the next 10 episodes, and, it's Josh Gad and Billy Crystal doing a sitcom. It was a wonderful show.
Well, Mike Reiss, author of Springfield Confidential, excellent book. I like how we didn't get fully into it, but you outlined the whole process from beginning to end, the 30 steps and 9 months it takes to make a Simpsons show. You have so many fun stories to tell about your time there and your other experiences. Excellent book for anybody, interested in media or entertainment or The Simpsons or anything. It's just your life makes a good story.
Oh, thank you.
And
I left out the boring part.
I also particularly like your book recommendations. Like I like Poking the Dead Frog by Mike Sachs and Judd Apatow's book. And I think there was you had listed 5 books. There was another book that I really enjoyed. I forget which one.
I think I can remember. It was Born Standing Up by Steve
that's
Martin.
A great classic book.
Amazing book. And then 2 memoirs, one by Norman Lear and one by Gary Marshall. Just fantastic. I like to think they're like this book, which is they're just telling the history and the insider look at the business, but they're comedy writers, so the book is funny, and they're making comedy, so the stories are funny too. They're funny histories of funny things that happened on funny shows.
Well, thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Couldn't be more of a pleasure. I'll say this too. If you're too cheap to buy the book, you should buy the book. If you're too cheap to buy Springfield Confidential, you can at least follow me on Twitter at Mike Reiss Writer. I give you 1 free joke a day, 1 good joke a day, just like the Jimmy Fallon show.
Do you write it from scratch that day?
I work so hard. I'll put like 3 hours work into some dumb tweet that goes up there, and and it's a hobby, There's nothing more to it than just I want to make a good joke. And it's what I said earlier about Karnak, which is sometimes I go, what a great joke I've gotten here. And I always move my chair back from the computer. I think it's going to be such a popular joke. The likes will come pouring out, and then nobody really goes for it. And it's a wake-up call and a reminder, wow, after all these years, I still don't know what exactly is going to make people laugh.
It's interesting. All right, well, thanks again. Springfield Confidential by Mike Reiss.
Thank you. Wow, that was fun.
AI might be the most important new computer technology ever. It's storming every industry, and literally billions of dollars are being invested. So buckle up. The problem is that AI needs a lot of speed and processing power, so how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? It's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. OCI has 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, offers one consistent price instead of variable regional pricing, and of course, nobody does data better than Oracle. So now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and less than half the cost of other clouds. If you want to do more and spend less, like Uber, 8x8, and Databricks Mosaic, take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/advance. That's oracle.com/advance. Oracle.com/advance.